I'm now on to making my cuff to go on the sleeve. I'll just show here one I did earlier, and there will be 2 layers to the top, and eventually there'll be some lace layers underneath. Just come over to the table here. These are my 2 layers. We have the top, which comes out a bit longer, and the bottom one, which finishes just shortly underneath the top piece here. On each section I've overlocked the top and I've pinked the edges, and I created a template earlier to create the scalloped edge, and then I've gone ahead and run 2 rows of gathering stitch along the top of each one. I started from the middle and gathered outwards each way, so I have 2 threads to pull either end, so I wasn't pulling too much fabric in one go. The top edge on my sleeves measures approximately 1 metre 4 from end to end. Down the very centre here, the back is about 18.5 wide. On the bottom one, taking the centre approximately, is about 23.5 centimetres wide, which will be the back of your cuff. In the process of turning a little tiny hem around the bottom of the scallops to make them nice and neat, when you get to these corners, what you want to do is just make a little slit just a little tiny one, just so you can then turn the edges over a bit better. And this is really fiddly trying to film and do this at the same time. There we go, so you can see done that in each corner, and I'm just going to carry on to the top and do that for both sections. Okay, I've now hemmed the edge of the sleeve like so, just run some little tiny stitches in it, and I've also gone ahead and gathered my lace, and I've started pinning that along the edge of both my cuffs. Once I've pinned it on, I'll just be hand sewing it down to the edge. Do that for both my layers. On this top one, I stopped just short of the edge because this will be a seam right here where they join.
Okay, after putting a running stitch around the bottom of your hem, remember that you mustn't take out this mark here that I put with a pin, because this marks where the centre front of the flounce will start. Okay, we're now ready to sew on the flounces onto the sleeve, and what you need to do is to make sure that your finished hem comes to the crook of your shoulder, crook of your elbow. That's where you bend your elbow, and then you want to add on 2 centimetres onto that, because that's going to be your hem. So this is your side seam on your sleeve, and what I've done is I found the halfway point and I've come in towards the side seam 1 centimetre, and I put a mark. So now that you have your mark, you're going to use this as your side seam. So it's best to lay this down flat. I'm just showing you on Betty at the moment, but you lay it down flat, and then from your mark of your hem you're going to do a slope downhill, and you'll cut off both sides of the sleeve at the same time. So this area here where you can see it's gone up slightly, that will fit into the crook of the elbow. Just in case you didn't understand or get that, I've done a small drawing here of an arm, and this is the crook of your elbow. So when you're measuring, you need your fabric to come past that mark by 2 centimeters, and it's at this point that you decide whether you want to have a flat hem straight across or you'd like to have a sloped hem. If you just like to have a flat hem, then you just cut across from that point and then put a hem in. But if you want to have a sloped hem that goes back down towards the back of your arm, you're going to have to put a slight slope in before you turn it up. And this picture here is just showing you where I put my initial pin or mark at the beginning. This is the side seam of your sleeve. You find the halfway point and then you put a pin or mark this side of your halfway point.
Okay, now I've sewn on my lace and I'm gathering the sleeve up. I'm just taking the 2 top tails and just gathering it, just pull it, gather it along. I need to make this small enough to fit the end of my sleeve. That'll be on both the layers. This is the bottom one I'm doing. Don't pull too hard because you'll snap. Now you have to pin the 2 layers together, making sure that you leave your top one here for the seam. You can see here I've pinned them both together, and then you just need to sew the layers together along the top and take all your pins out. Okay, I've now tapped and sewn my 2 layers together, and I've joined the seam at the front here. It's hand done, so it's not absolutely brilliant, but what I'm going to do next is I've got my lace and I've gathered it up, and that's all ready to put along the top edge here to match the bottom of the cuffs. Remember when pinning your lace on to do what you did on the cuff and leave a little bit of an edge to make a seam. So I left about 1.5 centimetres worth of lace each side, and then I've sewn that together and sewn the seam there. So now I've joined that seam on the lace, I can now sew the rest of it down.
Okay, when we made the fabric flounces, we were making a pattern more or less like this. It's just about the same shape as the one we used before. We're going to make a few alterations to it to make the lace flounces. But the first thing you do with this pattern is turn it this way up. This is going to be the lace at the bottom where you're going to put your scallops. Might seem a bit strange, but this is how it works. And what Tracy has decided that she wants to do is the front of the flounces where they overlap, we're going to make a gap of 2 centimetres between each flounce, and at the back we're going to make each flounce 5 centimetre difference, like so. So if we just go to the end here, I've measured this now, and it is 2 centimetres longer than the original fabric flounce, and this measurement here is 5 centimetres longer than the original fabric flounce. Now we don't want the closing seam to be right on the top of the lace. We're going to move it around to the side, and to do that, what I'm going to do is fold this edge to the centre like so and create a crease. I'm going to cut this off completely. And then what I'm going to do is move it all the way to this end, and I'm going to tape that together like so, and this will be our first flounce pattern for the lace.
I have here the lace that I'm going to be using to do my flounces. Now first of all, you need to get the full length of your pattern piece, which is 1 metre 19 centimetres from end to end. This fabric is actually quite wide, this lace, so I've managed to actually get about 4 pieces out of one strip. I bought quite a few metres, which I didn't actually need in the end. But what I've started off doing here along the bottom is I've cut a pattern out, so I've just basically just found a convenient line to cut around, and that will be your starting point. That's if you're going to do it this way. And at this point you want to check if your fabric has a good side and a bad side, because this on the end is going to be your seam to join your cuff together. Remember to leave a bit extra on the edge to create your seam, and make sure for each side you place your pattern piece on the opposite side if it should have a good side and a bad side. Okay, I'm going to be having 3 layers like so on a little drawing here, and each layer is going to have 5 centimetres between each one. So I know that the cuffs ended at 28 centimetres, so the first lace flounce, this top one, is going to be 33 centimetres long at the widest point, which is here.
Okay, lay your pattern piece on your material, and we want to make the widest part 5 centimetres wider than the pattern. But because we don't want too much cuff on the front, this is going to be 2 centimetres. So about halfway between the two, it will be 3 centimetres. So 2, 3 and 5. And you're going to cut a curve matching up. When you get to the end, this one has to be the same measurement as here, so that's 3 centimetres, and the end has to be 3 centimetres as well. For the middle flounce, same pattern piece, slightly different measurements. Instead of making this 5 centimetres, we're now going to double that to 10. So where you get to your narrowest point now, the previous one was 2 centimetres, this is going to be 4. So you find your halfway point, and the halfway point between 2 and 10 is about 6 centimetres. So that's the curve you've got to follow. And when you get to this end, it will be 6 centimetres. When you get to this end, it will be 6 centimetres. For the bottom flounce, this measurement will now be 15 centimetres, and this measurement will be 6. So approximately halfway is about 9 centimetres. So this at the end will be 9, and this at the beginning will be 9.
The next thing to do on all three sections is to sew a seam and join the pieces together. You'll want to start from the bottom, make sure the bottom matches up, and then if it gets to the top, if it's out a little bit, it doesn't matter too much. But the important thing is that you want the bottom to match up. On the inside it's a bit difficult to see, I appreciate that, the light's not very good, but you can just see here I've run a sewing line to flatten the flaps out. You can barely see it because it's so see-through, so you just want to make sure those are nice and flat. Next thing I'm going to do is run 2 lines of gathering stitch across the top edge. Now you don't want to do it all in one go, you want to do it in 2 halves to make it easier to gather. So what you need to do is just get your seam, which is here, place it nice and flat, and then just flatten it out across the table till you've got your roughly your halfway point on the other side, and put a pin. So you'd be starting the gathering off there and ended up with your pulling tails on the seam. So you're basically going from the middle to each end in 2 halves. Okay, I've now run 2 rows of gathering stitch. You can see my 2 tails here. This is my seam. If you remember me saying earlier, I've done left 2 tails each side. I've started off at that centre point and come to the end here. So I've got my 2 rows. You can just see I'm about a centimetre in from the edge, and then another centimetre for the second one. I'm now going to start pulling. Now you're probably wondering what about that weird curve thing we did earlier. Well, you'll see what happens now as the master seamstress here called Mother explained to me what would happen about 100 times before I got it. Is it's now straightening off. You can see it's actually becoming a straight edge almost. Okay, so I've now gathered in from the seam there to that centre point, excuse me. There we go, sorry. That was the centre point. This is the seam, and you're roughly gathering it in to try and fit your arm. Because eventually this is going to go into a piece of ribbon or binding or whatever we decide on. So then I just need to pull the other side in to match. Okay, I've now gathered in the top edges on both sides. So that's all the way around, and now you can see that's straightened that edge out now, so it's now a completely straight edge. Next thing you need to do is where you've got the edge of your sleeve here on the inside of your main sleeve, sorry, so you know what I'm on about, and here's the cuffs, is you just need to measure all the way around the edge of this part. My measurement is 34 centimetres, and then you need to add 3 centimetres to that measurement for your seam allowance. And this is depending if you're going to do it the way that I am right now. Okay, so I bought some bias binding here. You can use ribbon, whatever you want. I've cut out a strip to that 37 centimetres long. Currently this bias is 2.5 wide. Next you want to take the ends and you want to open the flaps out on each end. Okay, Next you want to sew a seam where you open those flaps out. So 1.5 centimetres in from the edge. Okay, now lay your bias flat on the table. You can just see your seam there. And you need to take each section, that means each sleeve piece. I've got number 1 here, which is the top layer. And you need to make sure that this fits end to end to the seam of your bias from the halfway fold line there. So it might just need a little bit of tweaking, so that looks about okay. It matches there to there. You just need to take your tails each side and tie them off so that your gathering doesn't come undone. Probably more than you need to, but because it's such thin lace, there's probably more risk of it coming out. And just cut. And you need to do that with all of your other pieces as well, separately. Okay, now you need to mush all your pieces together as one, so to speak. So take your bottom section, the longest, and drape it over your hand. Then take the middle section, and you're basically you want to match it all at the seams, making all the seams on each section line up together as your starting point, and the rest should fall into place. Okay, now all the sections are pinned together. You want to take it to the machine and run 2 rows of stitching, one just about there and one a bit further down in a zigzag stitch. Next you want to pin your bias onto the edge of the cuff. Now you want to line it up, this crease line here, with the bottom line of sewing on your lace, and make sure that your flaps for your seam are lying flat, and then just pin the whole thing on, and then just run a sewing line around there, like so, and then take all the pins out. Next you want to trim off the excess around the top edge, being careful not to cut through your sewing line. Okay, next you have to take your bias and pull it a little bit to the inside. You can just see what I've done here. So you've got that crease line, so you want to make sure that's folded underneath, otherwise you'll have a raw edge hanging out. So you want to make sure that's tucked inside, that's pushed down flat, and that goes inside. You don't want to stretch it too much, because although it's bias, you might stretch it out of shape. And then you just want to put pins in. Now I've already started sewing most of this, so I'm just showing you the end what to do. I'll just rescue my needle. Okay, so you're just catching a little bit of the edge to the lace. Just a little tiny bit of lace, as you can there pick some of the lace up, and then just barely on the edge. Every few stitches I go over it a couple of times, but as I'm at the end now nearly, actually I might do it here at the pin, so I'll go on once and over again. And this is all you need to do all the way around till you reach the beginning again.
We've decided that we're going to use the loop and button method so that the loops will actually attach to the button on the sleeve. Find the centre front of your flounce and put a pin there. Then directly opposite on this side you'll put another pin, and then halve that like so, and you'll be putting pins on this side for your loops. I'll just show you how to sew a loop. Go to the side of the pin about half a centimetre, just go through the top of your bias, and then you're going to use and lay it onto your bias like that, and get the width of your button and just go through the top like so. So now we can get rid of the button and the pin. So what we're going to do now is come back across and just pick up a stitch, and then back across again where you went in the first time, pick up a stitch, and then one last time going back to where you started like so. I'm just going to cut off that tail now where my knot was. Okay, this will be a blanket stitch, so make sure that you've got a decent amount of thread but not too much. Then you're going to take it around in a circle. So, okay, so we're going to move the thread away from you, and then we're going to put the needle underneath all of those loops that you just made, and then you're going to come up through that circle of thread you made, and this is making our blanket stitch. When it gets to about here, you're going to be pulling it over to the side and slightly tighten it. So the thread goes away from you in a circle. You go under all the loops and up through that circle you made, and then push your stitch over, and you're going to carry on like this for the whole length of the loop. That's round in a circle, push the thread away from you, underneath, up through that hole you just made, and then slide your stitch over. One last stitch to finish. Now that you're finished, just go through your bias at the top about 3 times just to lock it off. That thread. You want to be able to push your button through that loop, and it's got to be tight. Like so, and that's all your loops done.
Just put the dress on our dummy called Betty for a moment so you can see the sleeve flounces a bit better. You can just see underneath here where they've been hooked on. That's what the inside looks like. And you can just see here all the layers. So you've got layer 1, 2 and 3. Now you can see why we made the pattern so there isn't a seam at the front. So now the seam is on the side somewhere. Tend to lose it, but it's there. Here we go, I found it, sorry, that's on the side there. So now that's on the side, you won't see it. So it looks from the front like it's one continuous piece. Just show you quickly from the back here what it looks like. Of course, it's completely up to you what you do and how you do it and what angle you want it at. I preferred this because it looked prettier, but you can do whatever you like. And that finishes the sleeves.